Do you guys remember the first time? Well, Robin, I'll turn to you first. Do you remember the first time you met Anne? That you were aware of Anne Parmenter?
She's probably going to correct me on this, but I think the first time, she's memorable, right? With her accent and her mannerisms. I'm sure it was before this, but my most vivid memory is when Anne was coaching at Conn College and I was coaching at Trinity, and she's going to remember this, and again, this is just one snippet of many memories. But they played in the middle of what would be the Trinity quad, that Conn College quad. And in the spring, I always thought without baseball, the student fans were always looking for some place to cheer and berate the other team. And so they would come out in mass. And we were there in the middle of the Conn College quad. I mean, they brought out sofas from their playing lacrosse. They brought out sofas. And the bench and the coaches were right on the side with the fans. You know how that goes. I don't remember what was said. It was what year would it have been? The 70s, maybe? I don't even know.
What year did you
I started
start?
at Con 1987.
Oh, well, then it was 87. And the officials didn't stop the game. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything to Ann. Ann asked the officials to stop the game. And she turned around. I have no idea what the score was. I don't know anything. She turned around, and then, I'm not even going to try to imitate her accent, she said, "This is a sporting contest, and if you're not going to be a good sport, I'd prefer you leave." And I was so impressed, overwhelmed, grateful, thankful. So that's like my most vivid memory. But I know that before every game, field hockey and lacrosse, when she was at Conn and I was at Trinity coach, we would talk so much about what was going on in our personal lives before the game. I guess our teams were warming up, I guess. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh shoot, the whistle blew. I guess we got good luck. I mean, it was a real friendship. I mean,
do you recall, Anne, your first?
Time? Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
So the first time I ever met Robin, I was an assistant coach at Amherst. I was doing my master's at UMass. I lived in a dorm at Amherst. I had a meal card. And I was Sue Zawacki's assistant coach. She was the field hockey coach. And I just remember, who the heck is this woman who is dressed to the nines coming to coach field hockey? Because up to that point, most coaches would go to games like this. And I think Robin Sheppard single-handedly changed the dress code for some time of how the NESCAC field hockey and lacrosse coaches dressed. I met this Robin Sheppard, and of course Robin's voice is just memorable. When you meet Robin once Robin arrives, and her dress and then her voice was just so distinct. And I'm like,
what year would that have been in?
That was 1986.
Oh, 86.
85 and 86, because I was at Amherst for 2 years. Then I got to Conn, and then Robin and I started competing against each other as me as the head coach. So that is the very first time that I met Robin, but I would have been an underling, so you would have remembered me.
I do have to say about the dress thing, because I have been ridiculed, admired perhaps, but ridiculed.
Friendly ribbing.
Yes.
Friendly, yeah.
And I don't know what started it, but this is what I think it was. I thought coaches were like Pat Riley, like Tom Landry. Your team was putting on a uniform. They weren't wearing their practice gear for the game. They were putting in. So the coach was expected to put on a uniform, and that's how I started. And I mean, there were blizzards, right?
Oh yeah.
And I was not putting on a down jacket to hide my outfit, so I had long underwear, heating little iPads. But yeah, that's I'm kind of known for that. There were some bad outfits, I got to tell you, Kevin.
Can you think for a moment and just try to describe one another's teams? So you're competing against each other at Conn and at Trinity. Yeah. And think about, you've talked about each other's personalities, but your team as a reflection of the coach. Like,
I have so many stories I could tell you. So many.
Pick a couple.
So the Trinity teams that Robin coached were always blonde, beautiful, preppy, 5'9" and above, naturally athletic, graceful, and gifted. We'd go to Florida every year for spring break lacrosse. We would all be crammed into 7-passenger vans, sitting on the cooler, putting literally 10 kids in a 7-passenger van because we couldn't afford anything else. Robin's seniors would come driving in convertibles.
No, this is not true.
We
never had convertibles.
The rest of spring break would be like, oh, here come the Trinity girls, and they would then beat the living pants off of you. And
how did they play? On the field, how would you describe
I remember the days of us competing both in field hockey and lacrosse. Robin's teams were always more athletic than my teams, always. But my teams would step up, and
this is my memory.
They would grind it out. We didn't have as much talent, but we would go down fighting. One field hockey game, we had 35 defensive penalty corners against us, which in field hockey is just unheard of. We lost the game. Laurie Sachs.
Does that just reflect aggression? And
mega talent, and we weren't going to let the ball in.
Yeah.
We lost 1-0, but it should have been 10.
Yeah.
But it was just gritty and never gave up.
You're going to have another story to tell after I remind you. But I would say Anne's fairly accurate on, except for the convertible piece. But
that was Robin arriving in the convertible then.
that could be true.
There was a convertible there, I promise.
And a blonde was driving.
Yes.
So there you go.
And there's no doubt about it, is a better teacher than I am. So I personally always felt that her teams were better skilled than mine. I appreciate the graceful and the talented and all that, and they were. But Anne is exactly spot on. When we played College, we might have been 9-1, and she may have been 3-6. I don't know, and I don't remember. You treat every game like it's the championship. I don't know how my players went into that game, but I think possibly not as prepared as I knew they should be. And Anne, besides being a great teacher, is still a great teacher and a great motivator. So when she says her team was ready, they came at us like it was the NCAA final game. And it was always a battle. And when I turned 40,
yes, this is
on the day of my 40th birthday, which was a Saturday, and we were down at College, and I did have a very nice outfit on, as I recall. Was it raining?
No, I think it was a nice day. Yeah.
They beat us. And
by 15-14.
Yeah. So I do remember.
Field hockey?
No, in lacrosse.
Oh, in lacrosse.
lacrosse.
Okay.
Sorry,
yeah.
same time.
15-14.
Okay.
So it did ruin my 40th birthday.
Yeah.
But
and I shook
and
Robin's
did you
hand.
know? Did you know it was Robin's birthday?
And I shook her hand and said, "Happy birthday."
Yeah, she did.
I did. Because it was the first time we ever beat them in lacrosse. I think I'd have to check the records. Of all the years I was there, 14, I think I only beat Robin in field hockey once and in lacrosse once. It was that kind of intense, but so when you did win, it was memorable.
Yeah, and our way down there in the bus, or the convertibles, I don't remember.
No, you went there on a bus.
My
It
team,
was only Florida, the convertibles.
My team gave me a birthday gift, and it was a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses, which I had never owned anything that expensive. I thought it was very generous of them. I wore them during the game. They beat us. I never wore sunglasses coaching ever again. Ever. Never.
Yeah.
And we did a podcast, and I interviewed you. You talked a lot about your experience as a youth playing sport. Do you mind just kind of talking a little bit about recap of your exposure to field hockey? We are here talking about your election into the Field Hockey Coaches Hall of Fame, and Robin also a member of the Field Hockey Hall of Fame, 2 Trinity coaches, the only school in the country to have 2 inductees. So that's why we're here. But can you, again, go back to your introduction to field hockey?
I first played in middle school, so we had a PE teacher, and everybody plays field hockey, so boys and girls, it didn't matter. And I had an old PE teacher that belonged to what in England is a club, an actual building with a physical structure and their own field, a pitch. And that teacher, I think that's when I first realized that you could be a PE teacher and do this as a job, and I just thought that was the coolest thing, and I knew then that's what I was going to be. And so that first ever PE teacher said to me, because I was a little athlete, I think you should belong to Wimborne Hockey Club. And so I didn't even know these things existed. I got all excited, and in order for me to get there, it was about 6 miles from my house. My mum worked at the weekend, my dad took care of the house, and they said, well, that's great, but you have to ride your bike. And so I would tie my field hockey stick across my bicycle like a boy's crossbar. So I would tie that on my bike, and it sounds like a bit of a Monty Python. I would ride 6 miles there and 6 miles back uphill into the wind, and I would play Saturday and Sunday. So I'd ride 12 miles both days, play 2 field hockey games, and I loved it. And I played at Wimborne until I left and went to college. And then from playing for your club, you can then try out to play for what is your county or your state. So I then played Dorset Juniors, under 16s, and it just kind of went from there. But
What about you, Robin? Do you recall, or can you recall for us your earliest exposure to field hockey in the sport?
Completely different in this country in that day and age. No youth sports available for girls. By the time I got to junior high and high school, you could your choices were cheerleader, drum majorette, that person with the baton and the big fuzzy hat, or field hockey. And so I played field hockey. And that was 7th grade, probably. There was no lacrosse available, so I didn't even get into that until college.
And where did you grow up, Robin?
In South Jersey, in a town called Bridgeton. And I come from a family of many of whom were in public education. A few coaches, a few member coaches. I don't remember like Ann did, I could do this for a living. I just knew I was going into teaching, and then by the time it came time, I was like, well, I'm pretty good at this. I guess I'll give it a shot. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, in 9th grade, my coach was Miss Morgan in field hockey, and she yelled, while I was playing, she yelled out with whatever fans we had there, "Get the lead out, Sheppard." And I am here to tell you that was 9th grade. I'm going to be 67. That made such an impact on how I coached. I knew that I would never embarrass an athlete the way that I had been scarred, obviously been scarred. And so it really, those few, when you go into coaching, even though we go to school for it, you bring all the good things of your role models, and you do away with all the bad things that you experience. So it was one of the bad things.
Do you have an influential coach, Anne, that you kind of harken back to either from your club or college days who really changed your trajectory or influenced you?
I think coaching in England is so different because it doesn't exist in the same way that it does here. Mm-hmm. But I could spin this, I have somebody who influenced me negatively, very similarly to Robin. Yeah. At 13, starting in what we call upper school, which would be high school, I had a teacher called Mr. Mockler, who we had to go around our English class and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And at that point, I knew I was going to be a PE teacher, so I proudly stood up and I announced that I was going to be a PE teacher. And he said, "Ann Parmenter, you're never going to get to college." Mm.
Whoa.
And talk about having the wind knocked out of you. I, to this day, would love to go knock on his door and just say, "I'm a full professor at Trinity. Thank you, the best gift ever." And I've spent my life being really angry at him because 3 years later my sister came through and he said, "Oh, you're Ann Parmenter's sister, and she thinks she's going to college."
Oh, wow.
And
what a bitter old guy.
yeah,
Like,
and I was, I think I worked hard in school, but I wasn't naturally gifted academically. But teaching a first-year seminar at Trinity, I share that story, or I have shared that story, because for me, it did the same thing of every single person has a gift in a different... but to shoot somebody down when they're so excited about what they want to do, I now realize he was who motivated me to actually, one, get to college, and then, if you want to say, live out that you can do anything you want and you dream big, and I just will always remember that day in class.
I think, I hope this isn't off topic, one of the things that has always connected Ann and I, probably even when you were at Conn College, but definitely when she arrived at Trinity, was we are physical educators. And now there's certainly sometimes I wish my major was psychology or English, but we both majored in physical education. So would you agree? We feel it's nothing against
a dying breed.
Yeah, it's just we have a sense of the importance of it, and I don't know. It's just something that we've always connected with, believed in.
And I think physical education, and then when I was at Connecticut College, we were adjunct faculty. So we were never allowed to vote in faculty meetings. There was always this, oh, you're faculty, but you're a little bit lesser than, which I think oftentimes in an academic setting, whether it's in a high school, I taught high school for 3 years before I came to the U.S. Oh, you're the phys ed teachers, you're the sports. So you've always kind of got, say, a chip on your shoulder. You're always having to justify what you're doing.
What is that saying? Those who can teach
those who can do, those who can't teach, which is baloney.
Yeah. That's been added to that. This is what has been my chip on the shoulder. Those who can teach, teach. Those who can't teach gym.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've heard that my whole life. And so what Ann is describing is something that I have heard that saying forever.
The dumb jock.
Yeah, just the meathead, a little bit less than. So
it is not hard to find hundreds of examples of people whose lives have been enriched and altered in indescribable ways through physical education. So we all respect and value sport, physical education, and growth through physical education.
And teaching that first year seminar was a real learning experience. To be in a classroom, you've done it yourself.
Yeah. Petrifying.
But certainly an understanding of the academic side of it, the advising piece for sure, and the frustration that a faculty member feels, an academic faculty, when somebody needs to get out early for a class, for a sport.
What was your first coaching job, Robin? Do you remember, like, literally the first coaching job that you had?
Are you asking me that because you don't know?
No, I want to know, like, did you...
I was a senior...
I want a juicy story of your
I was
first
a senior at the College of New Jersey, at the time Trenton State, and I was taking my last required course, and because we didn't have counseling centers and career centers and computers, the faculty member who taught the class, if you hung around long enough, they would read a list of job openings. And I was packing up my bags, wanting to get out of the auditorium, and Dr. Brink went through a list of jobs, and one of them was a 2-year coaching fellowship at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, coaching field hockey, basketball, and lacrosse. I was so naive. I thought a fellowship meant you had to be a fellow, a guy. I thought, I'd never heard of Trinity College.
Yeah.
I thought it might be one of the Seven Sisters, but I wasn't sure. And never been out of the state of New Jersey, by the way, maybe to see the Eagles play across the river in Philly. And I got cut from basketball in 9th grade. And now I'm going to apply to coach field hockey, basketball, and lacrosse. And I applied, I drove up in my green Pinto and interviewed with everybody and drove home, and they offered me the job.
Wow.
And
so what year was that?
1974.
Yeah.
I was 22 years old. I had just graduated from college. I had never coached a day in my life, and I coached Trinity varsity field hockey that September. And my thought was, I really don't want to get my master's. I'm already fed up with school. And I don't want to move out of state. I don't know anybody. And then I thought, well, 2 years, what's 2 years?
Yeah.
And 41 years later, I was still in Ferris Athletic Center.
And did you coach in those years that you taught high school? Or
it was different in England because there isn't coaching in the same way that there is here. So
you mean professionalized coaching?
No, so if you had to be a PE teacher to teach sports,
yeah.
and then you are expected, you don't get paid additionally, every night after school from high school, you teach every sport. So I coached field hockey after school. I would teach netball, which doesn't really exist here. You would teach basketball. So every night there was a club after school that students could stay for, and then for a field hockey game you drove the van, you umpired the game with the other PE teacher, and you went home. And then I was playing, so I was still very involved in my playing, say, career, because the clubs that are separate, they have you just go and you play at the weekend, or I was playing representatively at that point for the county of Kent, and then hoping to play for the region, and then that's how the national team gets selected. So I was doing everything that a PE teacher did after school, trampoline club, and then we had outdoor education. So you did everything. You had to be able to teach. So that's why I laugh now when someone gets assigned a PE class. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't coach badminton? Because
figure it out.
You have to be able to do everything. So that's what we did.
It's kind of the way I felt about the basketball. Like, yes, I got caught in ninth grade, but
I can coach it.
I was taught how to teach and coach for 4 years. Similarly, archery, volleyball.
Anything.
I could do it, and then I got on that court.
You were taught teaching methodology.
Yes.
Correct.
Which applies to any...
Now,
we would have a class called Games Concepts.
Yes.
And Games Concepts was basically learning about the fundamentals of either a team sport or individual sports, and not so much the skill piece, but how you organize a practice, how you write a practice plan, how you develop the concept of introducing a skill and building it into a small game to the larger game.
Not having long lines. You need maximum participation.
Keeping people moving, and they're not standing around in lacrosse. And it makes me cringe watching some of our younger coaches who have been great athletes, but nobody has actually taught them how to coach. Standing with your group always with their back to the sun, so you look into the sun and 25 other people are looking at you, always having a whistle and a watch, and
Well, I found those are things that in my young coaching career I just picked up because somebody told them to me, not because they were codified in a curriculum, which is incredibly valuable.
We had to blow a whistle in class, and if you didn't blow
you
it
had to
loud
learn
enough,
how to blow a whistle. By golly, I can blow a whistle.
Me too. You couldn't pass the class if you.
Yeah.
I always used to, my grad assistants, if they blow the whistle, like they're dribbling in it, I say, half the train has just left the station and the other half didn't even know that you blew it.
Yeah.
And that's part of when we have a grad assistant and we hire them. You better arrive with a whistle and a watch that has a stopwatch function, and we are going to blow our whistles.
It's so funny. Now, all this said, I'm in Oosting Gym coaching basketball. I had the best run 4 to 6 practices you ever saw. Stations, because I didn't want any downtime because somebody might ask me a question that I didn't know the answer to. So they were moving, man.
The whole time.
But all that said, as much as we're patting, when my players turned around during a game and went, "Timeout, coach," I was like, "Oh, I don't know what to say now." That was a different story. Then you need to obviously know your stuff. Back to the in your country. I'm reminded now, I took the field hockey team to England. We took 2 international trips. And the one we took to England, that was in the 80s, they were very confused as to
who you were.
Who I was. And they kept calling me the trainer, like the athletic trainer. Like I was going to tape ankles or something.
Or a chaperone or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was a total I kept saying, no, I'm the coach, and they didn't understand that concept. So I know where you're coming from with that, yeah.
So, I mean, part of the reason why you've got a lot of foreigners here is because I've been able to have a whole career in college or university coaching because it doesn't exist in England. The only place this job would exist would be in a physical education college, like a Springfield, where I would be faculty, but I would be lecturing in physical education and maybe helping coach the club field hockey team. So you'd have to be a PE teacher in a high school. It just doesn't exist.
And they're so good over there.
Yes.
I mean, my tour over there was, we got our butts handed to us,
Mm-hmm.
by 15-year-olds.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
When you were at Con,
Yep.
and Robin was very successful
Yep.
at Trinity, and was the first of the 2 field hockey coaches at Trinity to be inducted into this Hall of Fame. Can you talk about her teams a little bit more, and just in terms of the success and the tradition of Trinity field hockey as kind of embodied by Robin?
It was so very different because recruiting as we know it now, it was in its infancy where recruiting used to be you'd get a stack of letters in the summer that you'd have to reply to by hand, dear Coach Parmenter, I'm interested in, and then you'd have to literally write this letter, put an information thing and send it off in the mail. Robin had this pipeline from Greenwich Academy to Trinity College that no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get any kids from GA, and they
still are probably
powerhouse in field hockey and lacrosse. And these kids just kept coming to Robin all the time. And so that was something that my memory is, these just incredible athletes that already were arriving here. And we laughed that we used to, for our preseason, as little as it was, would go around the dorms and put signs up saying field hockey practice. And you would just hope that you actually got a goalkeeper or the right positions, and the kids would just show up, and Robin would be cutting more kids than I would be getting for my just varsity team. And so back in those days, there was a varsity and a JV program. And so I just remember Robin's teams arriving and us playing 2 games, and her JV team would have beaten my varsity teams in the early days, and they were just always just incredible athletes. And so that would be my memory in both sports, that they were taller, they were faster, they were stronger. I might have 1 or 2 that could match up, but across the board, Robin had better athletes.
Yeah, I will say, and I haven't recruited at Trinity since 1999, but in those early days, in the days that Ann's talking about, the director of admissions would call me up and say, I have Ellie Pierce, one of the best athletes to go to Trinity, field hockey, squash, and lacrosse, 3-sport All-American. I didn't know anything about her. She was up in admissions, and they called me and said, are you around to meet with somebody? I said, sure. So we got help. I got help from Jerry Hansen, Ben Williams. I don't know if these names are familiar to you, but male alums who, one was in Philadelphia, one was in Greenwich, Paul Rather, in Boston, and they were kind of doing my scouting for me and called me up. So I owe a lot of the success to, quite honestly, a lot of the men who were supportive of the program, both financially and talent-wise.
For most of those years, the NESCAC did not exist.
No.
Right?
That's
so
right.
Talk about, there's a rivalry between Con and
So
Trinity.
NESCAC existed since 1971.
We didn't play
We didn't
each
have a
other.
tournament.
I
We
see.
never played each other.
I see.
So 11 teams, we might have only played 8.
Back in those days, it's a question of philosophy, I guess.
Yeah.
Every single NESCAC school would finish their season with a winning record. Every single one of us. So we all ended the season being really happy because we would play Smith College and Wellesley and
Mount Holyoke,
and we would make up our schedule with all of the non-conference teams, and we would all be beating those teams. So when we went to a playing conference, now what this has created is some people win and some people don't.
Yeah.
And we can only play 4 non-conference games, which means teams are, you look and go, oh, this team's, well, they've been struggling. If they played a full non-conference schedule, they'd be winning.
Yeah.
And so...
That's a really good point.
And it's created in the NESCAC the most competitive...
Everybody's just beating each other up.
Right,
yeah.
right.
We could, back in the day, go to the ECACs. So that used to be our, penultimate tournament was to go to the ECAC tournament. And then we were allowed to go to the NCAA tournament before we became a playing conference. Then we weren't allowed to go to the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. Then we could go to the NCAA tournament and, they forgot that some of us were still going to the ECAC tournament. And then that got taken off the table. And then we went to this playing conference and only NCAAs.
The automatic qualifier. I think, if I remember correctly, the philosophy with the presidents of NESCAC regarding NCAA was... it so conflicts with the academic schedule, exams, and they just didn't want to put the students or the professors in that position. So previous to 1993, only individual athletes could go. So a wrestler could go, a track kid could go, a swimmer could go. However,
but teams were not permitted to go to the NCAA.
However, if it was a swimming relay team, that relay team could not go because they were a team. Individuals on that relay team, each one had to qualify in another event for them to go as a relay.
Wow.
Again, the philosophy was, if Ann's field hockey team at that time from Conn College got an NCAA bid, there might be 2 women on that team or more who had exams or had a research paper due, and they were feeling pressure from her and so we're just going to take it away. Yeah. So it wasn't until 93 that it happened. But you're right, before we were a playing conference and had a tournament, we very rarely played Bates, Bowdoin, Colby, and Middlebury. We would meet Middlebury halfway. I don't know about.
We'd play halfway.
Yeah.
Or...
a neutral.
And we all did our own schedules. There was no, obviously, common scheduling. Everybody was... And as the field hockey coach, the day my final game in field hockey finished that I lost, the phone would ring, and invariably it would be the coach from Tufts, and I'd go, lacrosse office, because the next day you were full into your being the lacrosse coach and trying to, in November, schedule your spring break games, which nowadays it's a year in advance.
Ahead, I mean, the horse is out of the barn. There's no going back, so I don't mean to sit here and whine about it. But there was something special about not being so involved in just one sport. However, the recruiting, as Ann has already mentioned, was less. There wasn't really any voluntary out-of-season practice. Did I say voluntary? Yeah.
Strength and conditioning.
There was no strength and conditioning coach. Yeah. I mean, I would meet with my lacrosse players. If I remember correctly, I would meet with them after we returned from Christmas holiday break. So that would have been January 25th. And I would say, these were my words, it would behoove you to get a stick and a ball and go down to that field house because the lights are a little weird and throw the ball around. Because we're starting on February 15th. Yeah. And I think some did and some didn't.
Yeah.
And we made it work.
So it hadn't been, and I don't know, I don't mean to use this in a pejorative way, but it hadn't been professionalized in the way that it...
But that was every sport. So, every single coach, this is how we were functioning, and every single person was involved in more than one sport. Yeah. So the men's soccer coach was the men's lacrosse coach, or everybody did something else. So all your attention wasn't on one group. Yeah. My entire field hockey team was my lacrosse team, and we get a couple of soccer players.
Yeah, that's true.
And so
big multi-sport.
Yeah.
Can you talk, Ann, about your transition to Trinity? And so 1999, Robin, you said was your last year.
All of us in the coaching world was like, oh God, whoever has to follow Robin is going to be enormous shoes that would be very difficult to fill. So there was a 4-year gap in there before I came to Trinity, from Robin stepping down.
Forgot about that. That's
but
right.
I will remember very clearly to this day, I could tell for me at Conn, we'd had a very successful few years prior to that, but it was getting harder to make postseason. I could tell I wasn't getting the same kind of student athlete. And at the time, I was the senior women's administrator at Con, and so I knew Rick Hazelton from being at administrative meetings. I was on the Trinity campus. It was like April 6th. We were playing lacrosse, and Rick saw me as I was walking out to the field to play Cara Tierney, who replaced Robin. And Rick said, the faculty has just approved for an additional position, and Trinity will be one of the first schools to have head field hockey and a head lacrosse position, separate positions. And I went, oh, that's great, Rick. Went off to the game. We managed
You didn't realize why he was perhaps telling you? Or?
No, he wasn't. He absolutely wasn't. He just was telling me just as in a conversation piece.
Oh, I see.
He had no intent whatsoever. We managed to scrape out a win by a goal. And then, for me, things at Con were not as good. And I started going, this is going to be interesting. I wonder which sport Cara will choose, because it was up to her which she was going to choose. She decided, it took some time, but she decided to choose lacrosse as her sport, to be the head coach. And I saw the job posted in the copy room in our athletic centre. Never in a million years did I ever think I could work at Trinity with the blondes, the 5'8", beautiful, preppy.
And here she is.
And
Hall of Famer.
I started going, could I apply for that job? So I did my due diligence, and at the time Eddie Mighton, the soccer coach at Trinity, had worked at Con. I, undercover, came and spent a day at Trinity. I did an admissions tour. I sat in on an info session. I had lunch with Eddie, the patio of the cave, to just see, could I be part of this incredibly, what I thought, preppy place? Could I actually work here?
You were scouting.
I was, big time, because I didn't know if I could do it. Robin probably didn't even know that
I don't think I
that
remember
undercover
that,
day. I talked a lot to Robin when I then did decide to apply. And then ultimately Robin really encouraged me. And then I wasn't Rick's first choice. So
I forgot about that.
Wasn't on his plan, no. And luckily his first choice turned him down.
Yeah. It's amazing that it was the roll call of jobs for you, Robin, and for you a advert in the copy room that led to 2 Hall of Fame careers, Hall of Fame inductee careers at Trinity, and countless women and students in general that you've influenced in your coaching and teaching.
And for many years, obviously when I started, and I think it was good that Robin wasn't coaching. It made it easier for me. But I would walk down into the lobby.
I was just thinking the same thing.
And Robin's office, which is the nicest office that was in Ferris and ruined, Robin would look at me and go, "Oh, do you have a game today?" And I'm like, "I work here, Robin."
It was so weird. It was weird to see her in our building, and then it was weirder that she had blue and gold on. What is going on?
Representing. She goes, "Do you have a game?" I'm like, "Yes, here, for Trinity, against."
Yeah. They work really hard at Conn College, and their coaches have been asked, I don't know if they still are, but have always been asked to do more with less than our teams. And I hope when you came to Trinity, and that, I mean, I would go down there with my team to Conn College, an hour early to warm up. The field. Anne was lining the field. Then she was hooking up the scoreboard. Then if there was a circuit breaker, she was fixing the circuit, tools and everything. She still does this at Trinity. But they were asked to do a lot, and it made me realize that I should stop complaining at the very few things that I had been asked to, extras that I had been asked to do at Trinity. So I was hopeful when you came to Trinity you would get some relief from kind of those
It was amazing.
coaching.
It was amazing to see the support we still get, and it's very upsetting today even when people complain. Having come from somewhere, from a high school setting where you had nothing, to a con where I couldn't believe they were paying me to coach. I was going to pay that. To see what we have now, I mean, I'm grateful every day for our grounds guys working at the weekend. Because they do.
As a positive influence on the coaches, which then translates to the student athletes. So that I always remark on that with the guys of like, I hope you feel well taken care of, that the school provides me as a coach to be able to provide you as student athletes with what you need to succeed.
And the funding of field hockey and lacrosse as an endowed program is, I think we're the only endowed program in NESCAC to have. And, you know, when I first came, we had a budget and the endowment.
Yeah.
Now we have the endowment, and people always think we have more than other sports, but we're running everything off of that. But the history and tradition that's associated with that makes us unique. And I really, really value that, as with the field. And I know we don't have the T in the middle of it anymore, but letting student athletes really understand the rich tradition and why Robin's name means so much. I think that's something that Trinity has that no other NESCAC, regardless of all their national championships, no other NESCAC has that.
And now they have you, another Hall of Fame inductee.
Yeah.
It's a pretty perfect place to end. So
Good.
Thank you so much for chatting with us. Ann Parmenter, inductee to the Hall of Fame in 2019, and Robin Sheppard, 2001 inductee.
Great.
So,
Thanks, Kevin.
thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
We could talk all
I know.